Hello and welcome. I'm the drowsy professor. As you settle in, let me know where in the world and at what time you're watching. Now, get comfortable. Take a slow breath. Tonight, we journey to see our sun gently embrace the earth. It's a peaceful, beautiful story unfolding in a distant dream. Let's travel there together. Close your eyes. Chapter 1. The distant future beckons. Imagine, if you will, stepping outside on a perfectly ordinary evening, perhaps 5 billion years from now. The air feels familiar against your skin, carrying the same gentle warmth that countless generations before you have experienced as they gazed up at the night sky. Above you, the same constellations shine with their eternal light, scattered across the velvet darkness like diamonds on black silk. The moon hangs in its familiar place, casting its silver glow across the landscape, just as it has for billions of years before this moment. But tonight, something is subtly different about the star that has been Earth's faithful companion since the very beginning of our solar system story. Our sun, that magnificent fusion reactor that has burned steadily for so long that its consistency seems almost miraculous, is beginning the next chapter of its own cosmic journey. Not quickly, not dramatically, but with the same patient persistence that has characterized every moment of its 5 billion-year youth. As you stand there in this distant future evening, breathing air that tastes exactly like the air of ancient times, you might notice that the sunset seemed to last just a little longer than usual. The golden hour, that magical time when photographers and romantics have always treasured the quality of light, stretches on with a luxurious patience that feels almost indulgent. The sun, hanging lower on the horizon than you remember from last week, bathes everything in a warm, honey-colored glow that makes even the most ordinary objects appear touched by some gentle magic. This is the beginning of the sun's transformation from what astronomers call a main sequence star into something grander and more expansive, a red giant. But unlike the sudden, violent explosions that we sometimes associate with stellar events, this change unfolds with the unhurried grace of geological time. Each day passes much like the day before. Each season flows into the next with familiar rhythm, and yet something fundamental is shifting in the very heart of our solar system. Deep within the sun's core, a process that has remained virtually unchanged for 5 billion years is beginning to evolve. The hydrogen fuel that has powered our star through all the eons of Earth's history, through the formation of the first oceans, the emergence of life, the rise and fall of countless species, the development of human civilization, and its eventual expansion beyond our home planet. This hydrogen is finally beginning to run low in the central regions, where the nuclear fusion reactions burn hottest and brightest. You cannot see this change with your eyes, cannot feel it in the air around you on this peaceful evening. The transformation happening in the sun's core occurs at temperatures of millions of degrees, in a realm of such extreme conditions that matter behaves in ways that seem almost magical compared to our everyday experience. Yet this invisible shift will, over the coming millions of years, gradually alter everything about the world you know. The sun's core, having spent billions of years converting hydrogen into helium with clockwork precision, begins to accumulate larger quantities of helium ash from these nuclear reactions. Picture, if you will, a fire that has been burning steadily for an unimaginably long time, consuming its fuel so efficiently that the process seemed like it could continue forever. Now imagine that fire beginning to burn through the last of its most readily available fuel, not running out suddenly like a candle flame blown out by the wind, but gradually shifting to burn different materials that require slightly different conditions. As the hydrogen in the very center of the sun becomes depleted, the nuclear reactions that have provided our star's energy begin to migrate outward, into shells of material where fresh hydrogen still waits to be consumed. This outward migration of the fusion reactions creates a subtle but profound change in the sun's internal structure. The core, now composed primarily of helium, begins to contract under its own gravity, growing denser and hotter even as the active fusion moves to regions farther from the center. This contraction of the core releases gravitational energy, adding to the heat and pressure in the sun's interior. Like a coal fire that burns hotter when you compress the embers, the sun's core begins to generate more energy even without nuclear reactions occurring in its very center. This additional energy flows outward through the layers of the star, eventually reaching the surface and beginning to make the sun slightly brighter and warmer than it has been throughout its long main sequence lifetime. Standing under the stars on your imagined evening 5 billion years hence, you are witnessing the very beginning of this process. The sun that sets before you appears almost exactly as it has appeared to every generation of Earth's inhabitants. But sensitive instruments, if they existed to measure such things, would detect that our star is beginning to emit just a tiny fraction more energy than it did a million years ago. The change is so gradual that no single human lifetime could detect it through direct observation. Imagine trying to notice the growth of a mountain by watching it for a single day, or attempting to perceive the movement of continents during a brief walk along the shore. The sun's transformation operates on timescales that dwarf human experience, unfolding with the patience of cosmic processes that measure significant change in millions or tens of millions of years. Yet even at this early stage, the effects of the sun's gradually increasing energy output begin to make themselves known in the most subtle ways. Earth's climate system, that intricate dance of ocean currents, atmospheric circulation, and seasonal cycles that has maintained our planet's habitability for so long, begins to respond to the additional energy arriving from our slowly brightening star. The change manifests first in ways so gentle that they might be mistaken for natural climate variations of the sort that Earth has experienced countless times throughout its history. Global average temperatures rise by a fraction of a degree per million years, a rate of change so slow that individual weather patterns remain virtually unchanged from year to year. The seasons continue their familiar progression. Spring follows winter with the same reliability that has comforted countless generations, and summer warmth gives way to autumn's cooling just as it always has. But over the span of many millions of years, this gradual warming begins to accumulate. Ice sheets that have persisted through previous warm periods start to show signs of long-term retreat. Not the dramatic collapse that sudden climate change might cause, but rather a slow, steady recession that happens so gradually that glaciers seem to be taking their time about melting, like ice cubes dissolving in a glass of water that's only slightly warmer than freezing. The oceans, those vast reservoirs of water that cover most of Earth's surface and moderate its climate through their enormous capacity to store and release heat, begin to absorb the additional energy arriving from the brightening sun. Ocean temperatures rise so slowly that marine ecosystems have ample time to adapt and migrate. Warm water species gradually extend their ranges toward the poles, while cold water organisms slowly retreat to maintain the temperature conditions they prefer. Coral reefs, those beautiful underwater gardens that have demonstrated remarkable resilience throughout Earth's history, begin a gradual migration toward higher latitudes. The process happens over millions of years, with new reefs establishing themselves in waters that were once too cold to support them, while existing reefs in the warmest regions slowly adapt to the changing conditions or gradually migrate to areas that maintain their preferred temperatures. The atmospheric circulation patterns that drive Earth's weather systems begin to respond to the changing distribution of heat across the planet's surface. The jet streams that guide storm systems across the continent shift their position slowly, like rivers that gradually carve new channels over geological time. Rain patterns evolve almost imperceptibly, with some regions receiving slightly more precipitation over the millennia, while others experience a gradual trend toward drier conditions. These changes happen so slowly that human societies, assuming they still exist in forms recognizable to us after such vast spans of time, would have more than enough opportunity to adapt their agriculture, their cities, and their ways of life to the evolving conditions. The rate of change is far slower than the natural adaptability of both human civilization and natural ecosystems, allowing for adjustments that happen as naturally as the migration of seasons. Forests begin to shift their boundaries over the millions of years, with temperate woodlands gradually extending into regions that were once too cold to support tree growth, while tropical forests slowly expand their range toward the poles. These migrations happen tree generation by tree generation, with individual trees living their full lifespans in stable conditions, while the forest as a whole slowly moves across the landscape like a green tide that takes millennia to notice. Desert regions, those areas where low precipitation and high evaporation create arid conditions, begin to experience subtle changes in their boundaries. Some deserts gradually shrink as changing precipitation patterns bring more moisture to their edges, while others expand slowly into regions where rising temperatures increase evaporation rates. These changes unfold so gradually that they resemble the natural variations that have always characterized Earth's climate zones, rather than sudden disruptions that might threaten existing ecosystems. The mountain glaciers that crown Earth's highest peaks begin their own slow dance of retreat and advance, responding to the gradually changing balance between snowfall and melting. Some glaciers retreat gradually up their valleys, revealing landscapes that have been hidden under ice for millions of years. Others persist but become slightly smaller each millennium, their ice flowing more slowly as the equilibrium between accumulation and melting shifts almost imperceptibly. Sea levels begin to rise as the expanding oceans warm and as land-based ice slowly melts. But this rise happens so gradually that it resembles the natural sea level changes that have occurred throughout Earth's history. Coastal ecosystems have millions of years to adapt and migrate, with salt marshes and coastal forests slowly retreating inland at a pace that allows them to establish themselves in new locations without losing their essential character. The polar ice caps, those vast sheets of frozen water that have served as Earth's refrigerators for so long, begin to show the effects of the gradually increasing solar energy. But even these massive ice formations respond slowly to the changing conditions, shrinking gradually over millions of years rather than collapsing suddenly. The process resembles the slow melting of a tremendous ice sculpture placed in a room that's only slightly warmer than freezing. The melting happens, but so slowly that the overall shape and character of the sculpture remains recognizable for a very long time. As these changes unfold over the vast expanses of time, life on Earth demonstrates the same remarkable adaptability that has allowed it to thrive through countless environmental changes throughout the planet's history. Species that prefer warmer conditions gradually expand their ranges, while those adapted to cooler temperatures slowly migrate toward the poles or to higher elevations where they can find the conditions they need. The great migrations of animals that have stirred human hearts for so long begin to change their patterns gradually, with some species traveling shorter distances as their preferred habitats expand, while others adjust their routes to follow the slowly shifting locations of suitable breeding and feeding grounds. These changes happen so slowly that they represent evolutionary adaptations rather than sudden disruptions, allowing species to maintain their essential behaviors while gradually adjusting to new geographical realities. Plant communities begin their own slow migrations, with seeds carried by wind, water, and animals gradually establishing new populations in areas that are becoming more suitable for their growth. The process resembles the natural expansion and contraction of species ranges that has always occurred in response to climate variations, but stretched over such long time periods that individual plants live their entire lives in stable conditions, even as their species slowly migrates across continents. The carbon cycle, that fundamental process by which carbon moves between the atmosphere, oceans, and living organisms, begins to respond to the changing energy balance of Earth's climate system. The warmer oceans hold slightly less dissolved carbon dioxide, while increased plant growth in some regions removes more carbon from the atmosphere. These changes happen so gradually that they represent gentle shifts in long-term equilibrium rather than sudden disruptions to atmospheric composition. As millions of years pass in this gradual warming phase, Earth begins to resemble a planet that's experiencing an extremely gentle version of a greenhouse effect. Temperatures that were once found only in tropical regions slowly expand toward higher latitudes, while the polar regions become more temperate over the geological spans of time. Yet the changes happen so slowly that each million-year period seems almost identical to the one before, with variations that fall well within the range of natural climate fluctuations that Earth has always experienced. The great ice ages that have characterized Earth's recent geological history begin to become less severe as the gradually increasing solar energy makes it more difficult for large ice sheets to accumulate and persist. The cyclical advance and retreat of glaciers that has marked the rhythm of Earth's climate for millions of years begins to shift toward a pattern of generally warmer conditions, with ice ages becoming shorter and less extensive, while warm periods last longer and reach higher temperatures. During this phase of gradual warming, Earth's overall habitability actually improves in many ways. The slightly warmer global climate opens up vast regions that were previously too cold for complex life, while the gradual nature of the change allows ecosystems to migrate and adapt rather than being disrupted. The planet begins to support more total biomass as growing seasons lengthen and photosynthesis becomes possible in regions that were previously frozen for much of the year. Human civilization, if it still exists in recognizable form after such vast periods of time, would find itself living on a planet that offers new opportunities for agriculture and settlement in regions that were once inhospitable. The gradual nature of the changes would allow for careful planning and adaptation, with new cities and farmlands developing in areas that slowly become more suitable for human habitation while existing settlements adapt to their gradually changing local climates. The beauty of Earth's landscapes begins to shift subtly as the changing climate creates new combinations of temperature and precipitation. Regions that were once characterized by one type of ecosystem gradually transition to support different communities of plants and animals. These transitions happen so slowly that they resemble the natural succession that occurs when forests gradually replace grasslands or when lakes slowly fill in to become wetlands, but stretched across geological timescales. As this first phase of the sun's transformation draws to a close after many millions of years of gradual change, Earth has become a slightly warmer, slightly more humid planet where life has successfully adapted to the new conditions. The changes that have occurred represent a gentle shift in the global climate system rather than a fundamental disruption of the planet's habitability. Ice caps are smaller but still present, oceans are warmer but still liquid, and the atmosphere maintains its familiar composition while supporting a slightly more active water cycle. The sun, during this entire period, has increased its energy output by only a small percentage. But even this modest change has been enough to drive the gradual transformations that have reshaped Earth's climate zones and ecosystems. As you imagine standing under the stars at the end of this phase, looking up at a sun that appears virtually identical to the one that is shown on Earth throughout human history, you are witnessing a star that has successfully completed the first stage of its evolution beyond the main sequence. This is just the beginning of the sun's transformation into a red giant, a change that will ultimately reshape our entire solar system over the hundreds of millions of years to come. But even this beginning demonstrates the remarkable gentleness with which cosmic processes can unfold, allowing time for adaptation and evolution rather than sudden disruption. As we prepare to continue our journey through the deep future, we can take comfort in the knowledge that the universe operates on timescales that provide ample opportunity for life to adjust and thrive even during periods of fundamental change. Chapter 2: First Signs of Solar Change. As we drift forward through the gentle currents of deep time, moving beyond those first millions of years of subtle warming, we begin to witness the sun entering a more pronounced phase of its stellar evolution. Picture yourself floating peacefully through this vast ocean of time, watching as changes that seemed almost imperceptible during Earth's gradual warming period begin to manifest more clearly in the behavior of our ancient star. The sun, having spent tens of millions of years slowly brightening as its core contracted and its fusion reactions migrated outward, now begins to show the first unmistakable signs of its transformation into something larger and more luminous than the steady yellow star that has been Earth's companion for so long. These changes don't announce themselves with sudden flares or dramatic outbursts. but rather emerge with the same patient persistence that characterizes all the most profound transformations in nature. If you could somehow observe the sun with instruments sensitive enough to detect the subtlest changes in its appearance, you might begin to notice that our star seems to be taking on a slightly different character as the eons pass. The perfectly circular disk that has appeared so constant and reliable throughout all of recorded history begins to show the first hints of expansion, growing ever so gradually larger in apparent size as the sun's outer layers respond to the increasing energy flowing outward from its evolving core. This expansion happens so slowly that no human lifetime could possibly detect it through direct observation. Imagine watching a flower bloom, but slowed down so dramatically that the opening of each petal takes thousands of years. The sun's growth occurs at an even more leisurely pace, with its diameter increasing by amounts so small that millions of years pass before the change becomes noticeable even to the most precise measurements. Deep within the sun's interior, the helium core that has been gradually accumulating from billions of years of hydrogen fusion continues to contract under its own immense gravity. As this core becomes denser and hotter, it begins to influence the layers of material surrounding it in increasingly dramatic ways. The shell of hydrogen that surrounds the helium core becomes the new site of nuclear fusion, burning more vigorously than the original core reactions ever did as it responds to the increased temperature and pressure created by the contracting helium center. This shell burning creates a fascinating paradox that lies at the heart of stellar evolution. While the core contracts and becomes smaller, the energy released by this contraction and by the more vigorous shell burning causes the sun's outer layers to expand and cool. It's as if the sun is simultaneously shrinking on the inside and growing on the outside, like a balloon that becomes larger even as someone squeezes its center more tightly. The increased energy output from the shell burning begins to make itself felt throughout the entire structure of the sun. The radiative zone, where energy travels outward from the core through the absorption and re-emission of photons, begins to carry more energy than it has throughout the sun's main sequence lifetime. This additional energy flows through the convective zone near the sun's surface, where hot material rises and cool material sinks in great circulation patterns that transport heat toward the stellar surface. As this extra energy reaches the sun's photosphere, the visible surface that we see when we look at our star, it begins to drive a gradual expansion of the sun's outer layers. The photosphere slowly moves outward, increasing the sun's diameter while simultaneously causing the surface temperature to decrease slightly. This might seem contradictory at first. How can the sun become both brighter and cooler at the same time? The answer lies in the dramatic increase in the sun's surface area that accompanies its expansion. Picture a glowing ember from a fire that somehow begins to expand while maintaining the same total amount of heat energy. As the ember grows larger, its surface temperature would decrease because the same amount of energy is now spread over a much larger area. However, because the total surface area has increased so dramatically, the ember would actually emit more total light and heat despite its lower surface temperature. This is precisely what begins to happen to the sun as it enters its red giant phase. The color of sunlight itself begins to shift very gradually as the sun's surface temperature slowly decreases. The brilliant white-yellow light that has illuminated Earth throughout its history starts to take on subtle hints of orange and red as the sun's photosphere cools from its current temperature of about 5,800 Kelvin toward the cooler temperatures characteristic of red giant stars. This color change happens so slowly that thousands of generations might pass without anyone noticing the difference. But sensitive instruments would detect the gradual shift in the sun's spectrum. As the sun's luminosity increases due to its expanding surface area, Earth begins to receive noticeably more energy than it has throughout its history. This isn't the subtle increase of the early warming period, but rather a more pronounced change that begins to drive significant alterations in Earth's climate system. The additional energy arrives gradually enough that Earth's climate can respond and adjust, But the magnitude of the change starts to push our planet's environmental systems beyond the ranges they have experienced during the previous billions of years. Global temperatures begin to rise more rapidly than they did during the early phase of solar evolution, though still gradually enough that climate systems have time to adjust and find new equilibrium states. The polar ice caps, which have been slowly retreating for millions of years, now begin to melt at an accelerated pace as the increased solar energy makes it difficult for ice to persist even in the coldest regions of the planet. The Arctic Ocean, which has been covered by sea ice for millions of years, begins to experience longer periods of open water during what were once the coldest seasons. The ice that forms during winter becomes thinner and less extensive with each passing millennium, until eventually the Arctic Ocean remains ice-free year-round for the first time in Earth's recent geological history. This transformation happens gradually enough that Arctic ecosystems have time to adapt, with polar bears and other ice-dependent species slowly shifting their behaviors and ranges to accommodate the changing conditions. Antarctica, that vast continent of ice at the South Pole, begins its own slow transformation as the increasing solar energy makes it more difficult for the massive ice sheets to maintain their ancient dimensions. The ice doesn't disappear suddenly or catastrophically, but rather begins a gradual retreat that unfolds over millions of years. Coastal regions of Antarctica that have been buried under ice for eons slowly emerge, revealing landscapes that haven't seen sunlight for geological ages. As the Antarctic ice sheets slowly diminish, they reveal a continent of surprising complexity and beauty. Mountains and valleys that have been hidden beneath miles of ice for millions of years emerge into the gradually warming Antarctic climate. These newly exposed landscapes, freed from the immense weight of ice that has pressed down on them for so long, begin to rise slowly as the bedrock rebounds from its long compression. The process of glacial rebound happens with the same patient persistence that characterizes all geological processes, with the land rising by inches per century as it adjusts to the removal of the ice's weight. Lakes and rivers begin to form in these newly exposed regions, fed by the gradually melting ice and creating entirely new freshwater ecosystems in areas that have been frozen for millions of years. The global sea level begins to rise more rapidly as the melting polar ice adds its freshwater to the oceans. This rise happens gradually enough that coastal ecosystems and human settlements have ample time to adapt and relocate, but the magnitude of the change begins to reshape the geography of Earth's continents. Low-lying coastal areas that have been above sea level for millions of years slowly become submerged, while the warming oceans themselves expand slightly due to thermal expansion. The rising seas don't create sudden floods or a catastrophic inundation, but rather advance slowly inland like the world's most patient tide. Salt marshes and coastal forests gradually migrate inland, establishing themselves in areas that become suitable as the sea level rises. Coastal cities and settlements have centuries or millennia to plan and implement gradual relocations to higher ground, allowing for orderly adaptation rather than emergency evacuation. The changing ocean levels create new patterns of coastal geography that gradually reshape the outlines of continents. Narrow peninsulas become chains of islands, while low-lying river valleys become long, narrow bays that extend far inland. These changes happen slowly enough that they resemble the natural processes of erosion and sedimentation that have always shaped Earth's coastlines, but accelerated slightly by the rising sea levels. The ocean currents that have driven Earth's climate patterns for millions of years begin to respond to the changing temperature gradients and sea levels. The great conveyor belt circulation that moves warm water toward the poles and cold water toward the equator starts to weaken and shift as the temperature differences between polar and equatorial regions become less pronounced. This doesn't happen suddenly, but rather unfolds over thousands of years as the ocean system gradually adjusts to the new energy balance. The weakening of polar temperature gradients has profound effects on Earth's weather patterns. The jet streams that guide storm systems across the continents begin to shift and weaken as the temperature differences that drive them become less extreme. This leads to changes in precipitation patterns that unfold gradually across the millennia, with some regions becoming wetter while others experience gradual drying trends. The tropical regions of Earth, which have always been the warmest parts of the planet, begin to experience temperatures that push beyond the ranges that have characterized them throughout Earth's history. But even in these warming tropics, the temperature increases happen gradually enough that ecosystems have time to adapt and migrate. Tropical forests begin to shift their species composition as heat-tolerant plants and animals become more dominant, while species that prefer slightly cooler conditions gradually migrate toward higher elevations or latitudes. The great rainforests of Earth, those verdant ecosystems that have served as the planet's lungs for millions of years, begin their own gradual transformation. The Amazon, Congo, and Southeast Asian rainforests don't disappear suddenly, but rather slowly change their character as the warming climate alters the balance between precipitation and evaporation. Some areas of rainforest become more seasonal, with distinct wet and dry periods, while others maintain their lush character but with different species compositions adapted to the warmer conditions. The atmospheric circulation patterns that distribute heat around the planet begin to shift in response to the reduced temperature gradients between poles and equator. The trade winds that have blown steadily for millions of years start to weaken and change direction slightly, while the monsoon patterns that bring seasonal rains to vast regions of the planet begin to shift their timing and intensity. These changes happen gradually enough that agricultural systems and natural ecosystems have time to adapt their cycles to the new patterns. The water cycle itself begins to intensify as the warmer atmosphere can hold more moisture, and the increased solar energy drives more vigorous evaporation from oceans and land surfaces. This leads to generally more humid conditions across much of the planet, with more frequent precipitation in many regions. The additional moisture in the atmosphere also creates more impressive cloud formations and more spectacular sunsets as the increased water vapor scatters and reflects the sun's gradually reddening light. The carbon cycle, that fundamental process by which carbon moves between the atmosphere, oceans, and living organisms, begins to respond more dramatically to the changing climate conditions. The warmer oceans hold less dissolved carbon dioxide, releasing some of their stored carbon back to the atmosphere. At the same time, the longer growing seasons and increased atmospheric carbon dioxide levels stimulate plant growth in many regions, creating a complex feedback system that gradually adjusts to the new energy balance. Mountain ranges around the world begin to experience more rapid glacial retreat as the warming climate makes it difficult for ice to persist even at high elevations. The great glaciers of the Himalayas, Andes, Alps, and other mountain chains slowly retreat up their valleys, revealing landscapes that have been hidden under ice for thousands or millions of years. The retreat happens gradually enough that mountain ecosystems can migrate upward with the changing conditions, but fast enough that the character of these high-altitude regions begins to change noticeably. The permafrost regions of the far north, where soil has remained frozen for thousands of years, begin to thaw gradually as the warming climate penetrates deeper into the ground each year. This thawing happens slowly enough that the carbon stored in the permafrost is released gradually rather than all at once, allowing the global carbon cycle to adjust to the additional atmospheric carbon dioxide over thousands of years rather than decades. As the permafrost thaws, vast regions of the Arctic that were once frozen tundra begin to support more complex ecosystems. Forests gradually advance northward into areas that were once too cold and too permanently frozen to support tree growth. The advancing tree line moves slowly but steadily, with individual trees establishing themselves farther north each generation until continuous forest cover extends to latitudes that haven't seen trees for millions of years. The seasonal cycles that have governed life on Earth for so long begin to shift as the changing solar energy distribution alters the patterns of temperature and daylight that drive the progression of seasons. Winters become shorter and milder, while summers become longer and warmer. Spring arrives earlier each year, while autumn extends later into what were once the coldest months. These changes happen gradually enough that plants and animals can adjust their life cycles to match the new seasonal patterns. The migration patterns of animals that have followed the same routes for thousands of generations begin to shift as the changing climate alters the distribution of suitable habitats. Birds that once flew thousands of miles between summer and winter ranges find that suitable conditions now exist closer to their breeding grounds, allowing for shorter migrations or even year-round residence in areas that were once too cold during winter months. The great herds of animals that have migrated across continents for millions of years begin to adjust their routes and timing as the gradual climate changes alter the availability of food and water along their traditional paths. These adjustments happen slowly, with each generation of animals making slight modifications to their migration patterns in response to the gradually changing conditions they encounter. Marine ecosystems begin to experience more dramatic changes as the warming oceans alter the distribution of nutrients and the abundance of different species. Coral reefs, those magnificent underwater gardens that have demonstrated remarkable resilience throughout Earth's history, begin to migrate toward the poles as tropical waters become too warm for them to survive. The migration happens gradually, with new reefs establishing themselves in waters that were once too cool, while existing reefs in the warmest areas slowly decline or adapt to the changing conditions. The deep ocean currents that have circulated for millions of years begin to weaken and shift as the temperature differences that drive them become less pronounced. This affects the distribution of nutrients throughout the ocean system, gradually altering the productivity of different marine regions and causing shifts in the abundance and distribution of fish and other marine life. As this second phase of the sun's transformation draws toward its close after hundreds of millions of years of gradual change, Earth has become a significantly warmer and more humid planet than it was during the early stages of solar evolution. Ice exists only in the highest mountains and the most extreme polar locations, while most of the planet enjoys warm, temperate conditions that support lush vegetation and abundant life. The sun itself has grown noticeably larger and brighter, though still maintaining the general appearance of a normal star to any observer who might gaze up at it. The subtle shift toward redder light has become more pronounced, giving sunlight a slightly warmer, more golden quality that bathes Earth's landscapes in a perpetual late afternoon glow. As we prepare to continue our journey through the deep future, we find ourselves witnessing a world that has successfully adapted to dramatic changes while maintaining its essential character as a beautiful, life-supporting planet orbiting an evolving star. Chapter 3: The Gentle Warming begins. As we continue our peaceful drift through the vast expanses of cosmic time, we find ourselves entering a period where the sun's transformation becomes unmistakably apparent in every aspect of Earth's existence. The subtle changes that characterize the earlier phases of stellar evolution now give way to more pronounced alterations that reshape our planet in fundamental ways, yet still with the same patient grace that has characterized this entire cosmic dance. Picture yourself standing on a hillside during this distant epoch, perhaps 1 billion years further into the future than when we began our journey. The air around you feels noticeably different now, warmer, more humid, carrying scents and sensations that speak of a world where the very concept of cold has become increasingly rare. The sun above you has grown visibly larger than the star that once shone on ancient Earth, its disk now subtly but unmistakably expanded, casting light that has taken on a distinctly golden-orange hue that bathes everything in what seems like a perpetual late afternoon glow. The warming that was once measured in fractions of degrees over millions of years has now accumulated into a transformation that touches every corner of Earth's surface. Global temperatures have risen by tens of degrees compared to the early days of the sun's evolution, creating a world where the polar regions enjoy climates that would have been considered tropical in Earth's distant past. Yet this warming has unfolded so gradually that life has had ample time not just to adapt, but to flourish in ways that were never possible under the cooler conditions of the younger sun. The ice that once crowned Earth's polar regions has now retreated to only the highest mountain peaks and the most sheltered valleys in the Antarctic interior. The Arctic Ocean, once a frozen sea that challenged explorers and shaped global weather patterns, has become a warm, temperate body of water that supports ecosystems more diverse and abundant than any that existed during Earth's colder epochs. Gentle waves lap against shores that were once locked in permafrost, while warm currents carry tropical species to latitudes that have never before known such abundance of life. Antarctica itself has undergone perhaps the most dramatic transformation of any region on Earth. The vast ice sheets that once buried the continent under miles of frozen water have gradually retreated, revealing a landscape of breathtaking beauty and complexity. Mountains that were hidden for millions of years now stand revealed in the warm Antarctic air, their peaks catching the golden light of the enlarged sun, while their valleys support lush vegetation that seems almost magical in its unexpected abundance. The exposed Antarctic continent displays geological wonders that rival any on Earth. Ancient volcanic formations, carved by ice and revealed by its retreat, create landscapes of stunning natural architecture. Valleys that were carved by glacial action over millions of years now host rivers and lakes that flow through terrain unlike anything found elsewhere on the planet. The bedrock, freed from the immense weight of ice that pressed down on it for eons, continues its slow rebound, rising by inches each century as the land adjusts to its liberation. These newly revealed Antarctic landscapes don't remain barren for long. Seeds carried by winds, ocean currents, and migrating animals gradually establish the first plant communities on soil that hasn't seen sunlight for geological ages. The colonization happens slowly at first, with hardy pioneer species establishing footholds in the most favorable locations. But as the warming continues and soil develops from the weathering of exposed rock, these initial colonies expand and diversify into ecosystems of remarkable beauty and productivity. The process of ecological succession in Antarctica unfolds like a time-lapse film of evolution itself, but stretched across millions of years. First come mosses and lichens, those resilient organisms that can survive in the harshest conditions and begin the slow process of building soil from bare rock. They're followed by grasses and small flowering plants that take advantage of the gradually improving conditions. Eventually, shrubs and then trees establish themselves, creating the first forest that Antarctica has known in its entire geological history. These Antarctic forests develop their own unique character, shaped by the continent's isolation and the particular combination of climate conditions that result from its position at the South Pole. The trees that eventually dominate these forests are often species that have migrated from other continents over millions of years, adapting to the specific conditions they encounter in their new Antarctic home. The result is ecosystems that combine familiar elements with entirely new combinations, creating forests unlike any that exist elsewhere on Earth. Meanwhile, in the regions that were already warm during Earth's cooler periods, the continued increase in solar energy creates conditions that push the boundaries of what complex life can tolerate. The equatorial regions, once characterized by lush, tropical rainforests, begin to experience temperatures that challenge even the most heat-adapted organisms. But rather than simply becoming uninhabitable, these regions undergo their own remarkable transformations as life finds new ways to thrive under extreme conditions. The tropical forests of the equatorial regions begin to develop new strategies for dealing with the intense heat and humidity. Canopy structures become more complex, with multiple layers of leaves creating intricate systems of shade and air circulation that maintain cooler microclimates in the forest understory. Plants develop more efficient methods of heat dissipation, including specialized leaf structures that reflect excess solar energy and root systems that access deeper, cooler soil layers. Many tropical plant species begin to shift their activity patterns, becoming more active during the cooler parts of the day while reducing their metabolic activity during the hottest periods. This creates forests that have a distinctive rhythm, with periods of intense biological activity alternating with quieter phases when the forest seems to rest and conserve energy. The overall effect is ecosystems that remain highly productive while adapting successfully to conditions that would have been lethal to their ancestors. Animal life in these warming tropical regions demonstrates equally impressive adaptations. Many species develop enhanced heat tolerance through physiological changes that occur gradually over thousands of generations. Others adapt by altering their behavior patterns, becoming more nocturnal or crepuscular to avoid the hottest parts of the day. Migration patterns shift as animals follow temperature zones that move toward the poles, creating new wildlife corridors that connect previously isolated ecosystems. The warming climate creates opportunities for entirely new types of ecosystems that were impossible under Earth's cooler conditions. Vast regions that were once too cold to support complex plant life now enjoy temperatures that allow for the development of highly productive biological communities. These new ecosystems often combine elements from different climate zones, creating unique assemblages of species that have never coexisted before. One of the most remarkable developments during this period is the expansion of forest cover into regions that have been treeless for millions of years. The advancing tree line moves steadily toward both poles as warming temperatures make it possible for trees to survive in latitudes that were once far too cold. This northward and southward advance of forest creates continuous wooded corridors that span entire continents, allowing for unprecedented movement and exchange of species between previously isolated regions. The expansion of forest cover has profound effects on Earth's atmospheric composition and climate regulation. The additional trees remove vast quantities of carbon dioxide from the atmosphere through photosynthesis, helping to moderate the greenhouse effect that might otherwise make the warming even more pronounced. The forests also increase the planet's albedo, its ability to reflect solar energy, through the complex interplay of shadows and transpiration that characterizes wooded landscapes. The ocean systems that cover most of Earth's surface undergo their own dramatic transformations during this period of gentle warming. The warmer surface waters support entirely new types of marine ecosystems, with tropical species extending their ranges far beyond their historical limits. Coral reefs, those magnificent underwater gardens, established themselves in waters that were once far too cold to support their growth, creating new reef systems at latitudes that haven't seen corals for hundreds of millions of years. These new coral reef systems often develop characteristics that are uniquely adapted to their cooler, higher latitude environments. They may grow more slowly than their tropical cousins, but they often achieve levels of diversity and beauty that rival the greatest reefs of Earth's warmer periods. The fish and other marine life that inhabit these reefs create ecosystems of breathtaking complexity and beauty, with species interactions and evolutionary adaptations that demonstrate life's endless creativity in finding new ways to flourish. The warming oceans also drive changes in the global water cycle that create new patterns of precipitation and atmospheric circulation. The increased evaporation from warmer ocean surfaces puts more moisture into the atmosphere, leading to more frequent and more intense precipitation events in many regions. However, these changes happen gradually enough that both natural ecosystems and any human societies that might still exist have ample time to adapt their water management systems and agricultural practices. The enhanced water cycle creates opportunities for the establishment of lush ecosystems in regions that were once too arid to support complex plant communities. Desert regions that have existed for millions of years begin to experience increased rainfall as the changing atmospheric circulation patterns bring moisture to areas that have long been dry. The transformation of these desert regions happens slowly, with increased precipitation leading first to more abundant seasonal vegetation, then to the gradual establishment of shrublands, and eventually to the development of woodland and forest ecosystems. The process of desert transformation provides some of the most spectacular examples of ecological succession that occur during this period. Ancient lake beds that have been dry for millions of years begin to fill with water as increased precipitation and reduced evaporation rates create positive water balances for the first time in geological ages. These new lakes and wetlands become oases that support remarkable concentrations of life, attracting species from surrounding regions and serving as stepping stones for the colonization of formerly arid landscapes. Mountain ranges around the world experience particularly dramatic changes as the warming climate eliminates the cold conditions that once characterized high elevations. Alpine ecosystems that were adapted to short growing seasons and extreme temperature variations find themselves in environments where growing seasons stretch throughout the year and temperature extremes become much less pronounced. The result is often explosive growth in plant communities that were once limited by harsh climate conditions. The tree lines that once marked the upper limits of forest growth begin to advance rapidly up mountain slopes as warming temperatures make it possible for trees to survive at elevations that were once too cold. This upward migration of forests creates entirely new types of mountain ecosystems, with continuous forest cover extending from sea level to near the peaks of all but the highest mountains. The forests that establish themselves at these formerly hostile elevations often develop unique characteristics adapted to the particular combination of altitude, climate, and soil conditions they encounter. The glaciers that once crowned the world's highest peaks continue their gradual retreat, but rather than leaving behind barren rock, they reveal landscapes that quickly become colonized by vegetation adapted to the newly moderate mountain climates. Alpine meadows expand dramatically, while new forests establish themselves in valleys that were carved by glacial action over millions of years. The result is mountain landscapes of unprecedented beauty and biological diversity. River systems around the world begin to change their characters as the warming climate alters patterns of precipitation and snowmelt. Many rivers that once depended on seasonal snowpack for their summer flows find themselves fed instead by year-round precipitation, creating more stable and predictable water supplies. Other rivers, particularly those in regions experiencing increased precipitation, become larger and more powerful, carving new channels and creating expanded floodplains that support rich riparian ecosystems. The changing river patterns create opportunities for the development of extensive wetland systems that serve as havens for wildlife and centers of biological productivity. These wetlands often develop in areas that were once too cold or too dry to support such water-rich ecosystems, creating entirely new habitat types that support species assemblages unlike any that existed during Earth's cooler periods. Lake systems around the world expand dramatically as increased precipitation and reduced evaporation create positive water balances in regions that once supported only seasonal water bodies. Many areas that experienced only temporary lakes during brief wet seasons now support permanent bodies of water that become centers for the development of aquatic ecosystems. These new lakes often become remarkably productive, supporting fish populations and aquatoplant communities that transform entire landscapes. The expansion of freshwater systems creates opportunities for the evolution of new species adapted to the particular conditions found in each lake and river system. The relatively rapid pace of environmental change during this period, while still gradual on human timescales, provides strong selective pressures that drive evolutionary innovation and adaptive radiation in many groups of organisms. Soil systems around the world begin to develop new characteristics as the warming climate accelerates chemical weathering processes and increases biological activity. Soils that were once frozen for much of the year now support year-round biological activity, leading to the development of deeper, richer soil profiles that can support more complex plant communities. The increased plant productivity and longer growing seasons create more organic matter that enriches soils and supports even greater biological diversity. The carbon cycle undergoes significant changes as the warming climate and expanding vegetation alter the balance between carbon storage and release. The expanded forests and grasslands remove vast quantities of carbon dioxide from the atmosphere, while warmer soils and more active decomposition processes release carbon that has been stored in organic matter for millions of years. The overall effect is a complex dance of carbon cycling that gradually adjusts to the new energy balance created by the sun's increasing luminosity. As this third phase of the sun's transformation continues over hundreds of millions of years, Earth becomes a planet where warmth and abundance characterize almost every region. Ice becomes increasingly rare, existing only in the most extreme environments, while lush vegetation and complex ecosystems flourish at latitudes that were once frozen wastelands. The sun itself continues to grow, slowly larger and redder, its light taking on an increasingly golden quality that seems to enhance the beauty of every landscape it illuminates. The transformation that has occurred represents one of the most remarkable examples of planetary adaptation in the solar system's history. Rather than being destroyed by the dramatic changes in solar energy output, Earth has successfully adjusted its climate systems, atmospheric composition, and biological communities to create a world that supports more life and greater biological diversity than ever before. As we prepare to continue our journey through the deep future, we find ourselves contemplating a planet that has demonstrated the remarkable resilience and adaptability that characterizes life in the universe. Chapter 4: Oceans Transform. As our gentle journey through deep time continues, we find ourselves witnessing one of the most profound and beautiful transformations that occurs during Earth's gradual warming period, the complete metamorphosis of our planet's vast oceanic systems. The changes that unfold in Earth's waters during this epoch represent perhaps the most spectacular example of how life and planetary systems can adapt and evolve together, creating new forms of beauty and abundance that surpass anything that existed during our planet's cooler past. Imagine yourself floating peacefully on the surface of an ocean during this distant future time, perhaps 2 billion years beyond the beginning of the sun's transformation. The water beneath you feels noticeably warmer than any ocean that existed during Earth's earlier periods, with a temperature that remains comfortable and inviting throughout what were once the coldest seasons. The gentle waves that rock you carry the warmth of a planetary ocean system that has found entirely new ways to circulate and distribute heat around the globe. The deep blue waters that surround you have become something entirely different from the oceans of Earth's past. These are not simply warmer versions of ancient seas, but rather completely transformed water bodies that operate according to new principles of circulation, chemistry, and biological productivity. The warming that has accumulated over hundreds of millions of years has fundamentally altered how ocean systems function, creating marine environments that support forms of life and levels of abundance that were never possible under the cooler conditions of the younger sun. The first and most obvious change in Earth's ocean systems is the dramatic increase in surface temperature that has occurred as the strengthening sun has poured ever more energy into the planetary system. Surface waters that once varied dramatically between tropical and polar regions now maintain relatively uniform temperatures across most of their extent. The polar oceans, which once supported sea ice and frigid conditions that limited biological activity, have become temperate seas that remain comfortably warm throughout the year. This temperature uniformity creates entirely new patterns of ocean circulation that differ fundamentally from the current-driven systems of Earth's past. Without the dramatic temperature differences between equatorial and polar regions that once drove the great conveyor belt circulation of ocean waters, new forms of circulation develop based on different physical principles. The warming oceans rely more heavily on wind-driven circulation and density differences created by variations in salinity and dissolved nutrients rather than temperature gradients. The reduced temperature gradients between different ocean regions create circulation patterns that are gentler and more stable than the vigorous currents of Earth's cooler periods. These new circulation systems move water more slowly around the globe, creating longer residence times that allow for more complete mixing of nutrients and dissolved gases. The result is often more uniform and predictable ocean chemistry that supports stable marine ecosystems across vast areas of ocean surface. The warming oceans undergo significant chemical changes as higher temperatures alter the solubility of gases and minerals in seawater. The reduced capacity of warm water to hold dissolved carbon dioxide leads to a gradual release of CO2 from the oceans back to the atmosphere, contributing to atmospheric changes that further modify the global climate system. However, this process happens gradually enough that both atmospheric and oceanic systems have time to adjust and find new equilibrium states. The decreased solubility of oxygen in warmer water initially seems like it might pose challenges for marine life, but ocean ecosystems demonstrate remarkable adaptability in developing new strategies for oxygen distribution and utilization. Enhanced vertical mixing driven by wind and density differences helps distribute oxygen throughout the water column, while marine organisms evolve more efficient methods of extracting and using the dissolved oxygen that remains available. Perhaps the most spectacular transformation occurs in the development of entirely new types of marine ecosystems that were impossible under Earth's cooler conditions. The warm, stable temperatures that now characterize most ocean regions create opportunities for biological communities that require consistent conditions to establish and maintain themselves. These new ecosystems often achieve levels of productivity and diversity that far exceed anything found in Earth's historical ocean systems. Coral reef systems undergo perhaps the most dramatic expansion and diversification of any marine ecosystem during this period. The warm waters that now extend to latitudes that once supported only cold water marine communities provide vast new areas suitable for coral growth. Reef systems establish themselves in waters that have never before supported coral communities, creating underwater landscapes of breathtaking beauty and biological complexity. These new coral reef systems often develop characteristics that are uniquely adapted to their specific environmental conditions. Some reefs grow in deeper waters than their tropical predecessors, taking advantage of the clear, warm conditions to establish complex, three-dimensional structures at depths that once supported only simple bottom-dwelling communities. Others develop in areas with unique chemistry or circulation patterns, creating reef ecosystems with species compositions and ecological relationships that are entirely novel in Earth's history. The fish communities that inhabit these expanded coral reef systems demonstrate remarkable diversity and abundance. The stable, warm conditions allow for the evolution of new species and the establishment of complex food webs that support everything from tiny reef fish to large predators. Many reef systems become underwater oases that concentrate marine life in spectacular displays of biological abundance and diversity. Beyond coral reefs, entirely new types of marine ecosystems develop in response to the transformed ocean conditions. Vast kelp forests establish themselves in waters that were once too warm to support these large marine algae, but which now provide optimal conditions for their growth. These underwater forests create complex, three-dimensional habitats that support diverse communities of fish, invertebrates, and marine mammals. The kelp forests that develop during this period often achieve sizes and productivity levels that dwarf their historical counterparts. The warm, nutrient-rich waters and stable circulation patterns provide ideal growing conditions for these marine plants, allowing them to form underwater canopies that rival terrestrial forests in their complexity and beauty. Swimming through these kelp forests feels like moving through underwater cathedrals, with shafts of golden sunlight filtering down through the canopy to illuminate a world of incredible biological richness. Marine grasslands also expand dramatically during this period, with seagrass communities establishing themselves in shallow coastal waters around the world. These underwater meadows provide critical habitat for many marine species while also playing important roles in ocean chemistry and sediment stabilization. The expanded seagrass beds create underwater landscapes that pulse with life, supporting everything from tiny invertebrates to large marine mammals that graze on the abundant vegetation. The open ocean regions that lie far from coastal areas undergo their own remarkable transformations during this period. The warm, stable conditions create opportunities for the development of complex planktonic ecosystems that achieve unprecedented levels of productivity. Microscopic marine organisms flourish in the nutrient-rich waters, creating the foundation for food webs that support abundant populations of larger marine life. Phytoplankton communities adapt to the warmer conditions by developing new strategies for photosynthesis and nutrient utilization. Many species become more efficient at capturing and using the abundant solar energy that penetrates the clear, warm waters, while others develop enhanced abilities to compete for nutrients in the more biologically active ocean environment. The result is often explosive growth in planktonic productivity that creates vast blooms of marine life visible from space. The zooplankton that feed on these abundant phytoplankton communities also diversify and expand dramatically. These tiny animal organisms form the crucial link between microscopic producers and larger marine predators, and their abundance during this period supports marine food webs of remarkable complexity and productivity. Swimming through waters rich with zooplankton feels like moving through underwater snowstorms of life, with countless tiny organisms creating a living galaxy in the warm ocean waters. Fish populations throughout the world's oceans respond to the transformed conditions with remarkable adaptations and expansions. Many species that were once limited to small geographic ranges expand their distributions dramatically as the warming oceans create suitable habitat across much larger areas. The reduced temperature barriers between different ocean regions allow for unprecedented mixing of marine communities, often resulting in the evolution of new species and the establishment of entirely novel ecosystem relationships. Large ocean predators such as sharks, whales, and marine reptiles find themselves in an ocean system that can support much larger populations than ever before. The abundant food resources and stable conditions create opportunities for these magnificent creatures to flourish in ways that were impossible during Earth's cooler periods. Whale populations, in particular, often expand dramatically as the warming oceans provide abundant food and comfortable breeding conditions across vast areas of ocean habitat. The deep ocean systems that lie far below the surface also undergo significant transformations during this period. The reduced temperature differences between surface and deep waters alter the patterns of deep water formation and circulation that once characterized ocean systems. While deep waters remain cooler than surface waters, the differences become less extreme, creating more gradual temperature transitions that support different types of deep-sea ecosystems. Deep-sea communities adapt to the changing conditions by developing new strategies for survival in an environment where the traditional sources of energy and nutrients are altered by the changing surface conditions. Many deep-sea organisms become more dependent on the increased rainfall of organic matter from the highly productive surface waters, while others develop enhanced abilities to take advantage of the chemical energy sources that become available in the transformed deep ocean environment. Hydrothermal vent communities, those remarkable ecosystems that exist around underwater volcanic springs, often flourish during this period as the changing ocean chemistry creates more favorable conditions for the chemical reactions that support these unique biological communities. The organisms that live around hydrothermal vents demonstrate that life can thrive under the most extreme conditions, and their expansion during the warming period provides fascinating examples of biological adaptation and innovation. The coastal ocean regions that border Earth's continents experience particularly dramatic transformations as rising sea levels and changing coastal geography create entirely new types of marine habitats. The gradual rise in ocean levels that accompanies the warming climate inundates low-lying coastal areas, creating vast new shallow water environments that become incredibly productive marine ecosystems. These newly flooded coastal regions often develop into extensive lagoon and estuary systems that support remarkable concentrations of marine life. The mixing of fresh water from rivers with salt water from the oceans creates brackish environments that serve as nurseries for many marine species, while also supporting unique biological communities adapted to variable salinity conditions. These coastal ecosystems often become some of the most biologically productive areas on the planet. Mangrove ecosystems, those remarkable communities of salt-tolerant trees that grow in coastal waters, expand dramatically during this period as the rising sea levels and warmer temperatures create ideal conditions for their growth. Mangrove forests establish themselves in coastal areas that have never before supported these ecosystems, creating complex intertidal environments that serve as critical habitat for countless marine and terrestrial species. The expanded mangrove systems often develop into vast coastal forests that extend far inland along river valleys and coastal plains. These underwater and semi-underwater forests create some of the most complex and beautiful ecosystems on Earth, with intricate root systems that provide shelter for marine life, while also supporting diverse communities of birds, mammals, and other terrestrial organisms. Tidal pool ecosystems, those miniature marine worlds that exist in the intertidal zone between high and low tides, develop new characteristics adapted to the warmer conditions and altered tidal patterns that result from changing sea levels. These small but incredibly diverse ecosystems become living laboratories that demonstrate life's ability to thrive in environments that regularly alternate between terrestrial and marine conditions. The Arctic Ocean, which has undergone perhaps the most dramatic transformation of any ocean system, becomes a temperate sea that supports biological communities more diverse and abundant than any that existed during its ice-covered periods. The year-round open water allows for the establishment of complex marine ecosystems that take advantage of the unique characteristics of this polar ocean system. Arctic marine life adapts to the ice-free conditions by developing new ecological relationships and life strategies. Species that once depended on sea ice for habitat and feeding opportunities find new ways to thrive in the open water environment, while new species colonize the Arctic from more temperate regions, creating hybrid ecosystems that combine elements from different oceanic zones. The Antarctic Ocean systems undergo similar transformations as the warming climate eliminates much of the sea ice that once characterized these polar waters. The Southern Ocean becomes a temperate marine system that supports unprecedented levels of biological productivity, with vast populations of marine life taking advantage of the stable, nutrient-rich conditions. Marine mammal populations throughout the world's oceans often experience remarkable expansions during this period, as the abundant food resources and comfortable conditions create ideal habitat for these large, warm-blooded marine animals. Whale populations, in particular, may reach sizes that dwarf anything known from Earth's historical periods, with multiple species adapting to fill the abundant ecological niches available in the transformed ocean systems. Dolphin and porpoise populations also flourish in the warm, productive oceans, often developing new social behaviors and ecological relationships that take advantage of the stable conditions and abundant food resources. These intelligent marine mammals demonstrate remarkable adaptability in developing new hunting strategies and social structures adapted to the transformed ocean environment. Marine reptiles, including sea turtles and marine iguanas, find themselves in ocean systems that provide ideal conditions for their ectothermic lifestyles. The warm waters eliminate the thermal constraints that once limited these creatures to specific geographic regions, allowing for dramatic expansions in their populations and distributions. Some marine reptile groups may undergo adaptive radiations that produce new species adapted to specific niches in the transformed ocean ecosystems. The chemistry of ocean waters continues to evolve throughout this period as the warming temperatures and changed circulation patterns alter the distribution of nutrients, minerals, and dissolved gases. These chemical changes create new opportunities for biological communities while also requiring adaptations from existing marine life. The overall effect is usually an increase in biological productivity as the warmer conditions and enhanced mixing distribute nutrients more effectively throughout the ocean system. Ocean acidification, which might have been a concern during the early phases of atmospheric CO2 increase, often stabilizes at new equilibrium levels as the enhanced biological productivity removes CO2 from the water, while adapted marine organisms develop increased tolerance for the changed chemistry. Many marine organisms evolve enhanced abilities to cope with altered pH levels, while increased shell and skeleton production by some species helps buffer ocean chemistry. As this fourth phase of Earth's transformation draws towards close, the planet's ocean systems have become warm, productive marine environments that support more life and greater biological diversity than any ocean systems in Earth's history. The warm waters pulse with life from the surface to the depths, while complex ecosystems demonstrate the remarkable ability of life to not only survive dramatic environmental change, but to use that change as an opportunity to achieve new levels of abundance and beauty. The sun continues its gradual expansion and brightening, its golden-orange light penetrating the clear, warm waters to greater depths than ever before, illuminating underwater worlds of stunning beauty and biological richness. As we prepare to continue our journey through the deep future, we find ourselves contemplating ocean systems that have successfully transformed themselves into something entirely new while maintaining their essential role as the cradle and sustainer of life on our warming planet. Chapter 5: The Atmosphere Shifts. As we drift deeper into the vast timeline of Earth's transformation, we encounter one of the most elegant and gradual changes in our planet's story: the gentle reshaping of the atmosphere itself. Picture yourself taking a deep breath during this distant epoch, perhaps 3 billion years beyond the beginning of the sun's expansion. The air that fills your lungs carries a different quality than any atmosphere that has existed before, yet remains perfectly suited to support the abundant life that has flourished during this remarkable period of planetary evolution. The atmosphere that surrounds you during this future time has undergone a subtle but profound transformation, shaped by the interplay between the sun's gradually increasing energy output and Earth's remarkable ability to maintain conditions favorable for life. The changes that have occurred represent millions of years of gradual adjustment, with each component of the atmospheric system slowly adapting to create a new equilibrium that supports even more abundant life than existed during Earth's cooler periods. The most immediately noticeable change in the atmosphere is its enhanced capacity to hold water vapor. The warmer air temperatures that now characterize Earth's climate allow the atmosphere to contain significantly more moisture than was possible during the planet's cooler epochs. This increased humidity creates an atmosphere that feels richer and more substantial, with a quality that speaks of abundant water cycling through evaporation, cloud formation, and precipitation in endless, gentle rhythms. Walking through this more humid atmosphere feels like moving through air that has been softened and enriched by water. The moisture content creates a slight haze that diffuses sunlight in beautiful ways, often creating spectacular optical effects as the golden-orange light of the expanded sun interacts with water droplets suspended in the air. Rainbows become more frequent and more vivid, while sunsets and sunrises take on qualities of almost magical beauty as the light passes through the moisture-rich atmosphere. The enhanced water cycle that results from the atmosphere's increased moisture capacity drives more vigorous precipitation patterns across much of the planet. Rain falls more frequently in most regions, but the precipitation often comes in the form of gentle, nourishing showers rather than violent storms. The stable atmospheric conditions that characterize this period tend to moderate extreme weather events, creating precipitation patterns that provide steady, reliable water supplies for the abundant plant life that has colonized virtually every habitable region of the planet. The composition of the atmosphere itself undergoes gradual changes as the warming climate and expanding biosphere alter the balance of gases that make up Earth's aerial envelope. The concentration of carbon dioxide, which initially increased as warming oceans released dissolved CO2, gradually stabilizes and then begins to decrease as the expanding forests and marine ecosystems remove vast quantities of carbon from the atmosphere through enhanced photosynthesis. This atmospheric carbon dioxide regulation represents one of the most remarkable examples of planetary self-regulation in Earth's history. As temperatures rise and CO2 levels increase, the enhanced conditions for plant growth lead to explosive expansion of vegetation that removes CO2 from the atmosphere, helping to moderate the greenhouse effect and prevent runaway warming. The process demonstrates the sophisticated feedback mechanisms that allow Earth to maintain habitable conditions even during periods of dramatic environmental change. Oxygen levels in the atmosphere increase gradually as the expanding plant communities and marine ecosystems pump more oxygen into the air through their enhanced photosynthetic activity. The higher oxygen concentration creates an atmosphere that can support more vigorous metabolic activity in animals, often leading to the evolution of larger body sizes and more active lifestyles among many species. The oxygen-rich air has a quality of freshness and vitality that seems to energize every breath. The increased oxygen content also affects the behavior of fire in ways that might seem concerning. But the higher moisture content of the atmosphere and the different vegetation patterns that characterize this period actually create landscapes where fires are less common and less severe than they were during Earth's drier periods. When fires do occur, they often burn in patterns that help maintain ecosystem health rather than causing destruction. The pressure patterns that drive weather systems around the globe begin to change in response to the reduced temperature gradients between equatorial and polar regions. The dramatic pressure differences that once drove powerful storm systems become less extreme as the atmosphere finds new ways to distribute heat and moisture around the planet. The result is often gentler, more predictable weather patterns that vary less dramatically from season to season and from region to region. Wind patterns across the globe evolve to reflect the new atmospheric dynamics created by more uniform temperatures and enhanced moisture content. The trade winds that once blew steadily across the tropical oceans become gentler and more variable as the temperature differences that drove them become less pronounced. Similarly, the jet streams that once guided weather systems across the continents weaken and shift, creating new patterns of atmospheric circulation that distribute heat and moisture more evenly. The reduced strength of global wind patterns doesn't eliminate air movement, but rather creates more localized circulation systems that respond to specific geographic features and regional variations in temperature and humidity. These local wind systems often create pleasant breezes that moderate temperatures and provide natural air conditioning for the landscapes below, contributing to the comfortable conditions that characterize most regions during this period. Cloud formation patterns change dramatically as the moisture-rich atmosphere and altered circulation patterns create new opportunities for water vapor to condense and form visible cloud structures. Clouds become more common and often more persistent, but they tend to form at higher altitudes where they can provide cooling shade without preventing adequate sunlight from reaching the surface. The result is often a planet partially shrouded in beautiful, high-altitude cloud formations that create ever-changing patterns of light and shadow. These enhanced cloud systems play crucial roles in regulating Earth's temperature by reflecting excess solar energy back to space while allowing enough sunlight through to support the abundant plant life below. The clouds also contribute to the spectacular optical effects that characterize this period, creating atmospheric displays of light and color that surpass anything seen during Earth's clearer, drier periods. The upper atmosphere undergoes its own transformations as the increased water vapor and altered circulation patterns change conditions in the stratosphere and beyond. The ozone layer, that crucial shield that protects life from harmful ultraviolet radiation, adapts to the changing conditions while maintaining its protective function. The enhanced water vapor in the upper atmosphere often creates beautiful noctilucent clouds that shine with ethereal light during the twilight hours. Atmospheric electricity patterns change as the higher humidity and altered circulation create different conditions for the formation and distribution of electrical charges in the atmosphere. Lightning becomes less common, but often more spectacular when it does occur, with electrical discharges that take on new characteristics adapted to the changed atmospheric conditions. The reduced frequency of violent thunderstorms contributes to the generally peaceful weather patterns that characterize this period. The interaction between the atmosphere and the expanded biosphere creates new types of atmospheric chemistry that support enhanced biological activity. Plants release more oxygen and water vapor while absorbing more carbon dioxide, creating localized atmospheric conditions that can differ significantly from the global average. Forests, in particular, create their own atmospheric microclimates that support even more abundant life than the surrounding regions. Chapter 6: Life's Final Dance. As we continue our gentle journey through the transformed Earth of the distant future, we witness perhaps the most remarkable chapter in the story of life on our planet, a period when biological communities achieve levels of complexity, beauty, and abundance that surpass anything in Earth's long history. This is not a tale of extinction or struggle, but rather a celebration of life's incredible ability to adapt, evolve, and flourish even under conditions that would have seemed impossible during our planet's cooler past. Imagine walking through a landscape during this epoch, perhaps 4 billion years beyond the beginning of the sun's transformation. Every step you take carries you through environments so rich with life that they seem almost fantastical in their abundance and diversity. The air around you hums and buzzes with the sounds of countless organisms that have found new ways to thrive in the warm, humid conditions that now characterize most of Earth's surface. This is life's final dance with a gradually expanding sun, not a desperate struggle for survival, but an exuberant celebration of biological possibility. The forests that now cover vast regions of the planet represent the culmination of millions of years of adaptation to the warming climate. These are not simply larger versions of ancient forests, but entirely new types of woodland ecosystems that have evolved to take full advantage of the abundant energy, water, and nutrients available in the transformed environment. Walking through these forests feels like moving through living cathedrals where every surface teems with life and every niche has been filled by organisms perfectly adapted to their specific roles. Tree species that dominate these future forests often achieve sizes that dwarf their ancestors, with trunks that stretch hundreds of feet into the air and canopies that create complex, multi-layered ecosystems within themselves. The abundant moisture and stable temperatures allow these giants to grow continuously rather than experiencing the seasonal dormancy that characterize tree growth during Earth's cooler periods. The result is forests of incredible structural complexity where different zones of the canopy support entirely different biological communities. The understory of these forests develops its own remarkable characteristics as filtered sunlight and the warm, humid conditions create perfect environments for plants that have adapted to lower light levels. Ferns achieve unprecedented size and complexity, creating ground cover that resembles the prehistoric forests of Earth's distant past, but with species compositions and ecological relationships that are entirely novel. The forest floor becomes a living carpet of mosses, fungi, and flowering plants that cycle nutrients with incredible efficiency. Epiphytic communities, those remarkable assemblages of plants that grow on the surfaces of trees rather than rooting in soil, reach new heights of diversity and beauty during this period. The stable, humid conditions allow these aerial gardens to establish themselves throughout the forest canopy, creating complex ecosystems that exist entirely above the ground. Orchids, bromeliads, and other epiphytic plants develop into spectacular displays that transform tree trunks and branches into vertical gardens of breathtaking beauty. The animal communities that inhabit these expanded forests demonstrate equally remarkable adaptations to the changed conditions. Many species evolve larger body sizes as the abundant food resources and stable temperatures reduce the metabolic constraints that once limited animal growth. Others develop enhanced abilities to move through the complex, three-dimensional environments created by the multi-layered forest canopies. Bird communities reach unprecedented levels of diversity as the complex forest structures provide countless ecological niches for species with different feeding strategies, nesting requirements, and social behaviors. The stable climate conditions allow for more elaborate breeding behaviors and more complex social structures, while the abundant food resources support larger populations than were possible during Earth's resource-limited periods. Mammal populations adapt to the forest environments by developing new forms of locomotion and social organization that take advantage of the three-dimensional habitat structure. Arboreal mammals become particularly diverse and abundant, with many species developing enhanced abilities for moving through the forest canopy. Ground-dwelling mammals also flourish, as the forest floor provides abundant food resources and shelter from the occasionally intense sunlight. Insect communities achieve remarkable levels of abundance and diversity as the warm, humid conditions and abundant plant life create ideal habitat for these small but crucial organisms. Many insect species develop more complex life cycles and social behaviors, while others evolve specialized relationships with the flowering plants that have become so abundant during this period. The pollination networks that develop between plants and insects become incredibly sophisticated, supporting the high levels of plant reproduction that maintain the forest ecosystems. The grassland ecosystems that exist in regions too dry or too regularly disturbed to support forest growth develop their own remarkable characteristics during this period. These grasslands often achieve levels of productivity that far exceed anything known from Earth's cooler periods, with grass species that grow to unprecedented heights and produce vast quantities of seeds that support enormous populations of grazing animals. The grazing animals that inhabit these expanded grasslands often evolve into forms that are specifically adapted to the abundant grass resources and stable climate conditions. Large herbivores may achieve sizes that dwarf their ancestors, while their populations often reach levels that create spectacular wildlife concentrations. The predators that hunt these herbivores also adapt to the changed conditions, often developing new hunting strategies and social behaviors that allow them to take advantage of the abundant prey. Desert ecosystems, which become increasingly rare as the warming climate brings more precipitation to previously arid regions, develop unique characteristics that allow them to support more life than any deserts in Earth's history. The plants that inhabit these remaining dry regions evolve remarkable adaptations for water storage and heat tolerance, often creating desert landscapes that pulse with life despite the challenging conditions. The few remaining desert animals develop extraordinary physiological adaptations that allow them to thrive in the hot, dry conditions. Many become active during cooler periods while resting during the hottest parts of the day, while others develop enhanced abilities to obtain water from their food or to tolerate high levels of dehydration. These desert specialists often become living examples of evolution's incredible creativity in finding solutions to environmental challenges. Wetland ecosystems expand dramatically during this period as the enhanced precipitation and rising sea levels create vast new areas of shallow water habitat. These wetlands become some of the most biologically productive ecosystems on the planet, supporting incredible concentrations of plant and animal life. The complex transitions between terrestrial and aquatic environments create opportunities for organisms with amphibious lifestyles to flourish in ways that were never before possible. Aquatic plants in these expanded wetlands often form dense communities that process vast quantities of nutrients and provide habitat for countless other organisms. The root systems of these plants create complex underwater forests that serve as nurseries for many aquatic animals while also helping to maintain water quality through their filtering activities. Amphibian populations experience remarkable expansions during this period as the warm, humid conditions and abundant wetland habitats create ideal conditions for their reproduction and development. Many amphibian species develop more complex life cycles or abandon aquatic stages entirely as they adapt to the consistently moist conditions. Others evolve enhanced abilities to live in a wide variety of aquatic environments, from temporary pools to permanent lakes and rivers. Reptile communities also flourish in the warm conditions, with many species achieving sizes and activity levels that were impossible during Earth's cooler periods. The stable temperatures eliminate the thermal constraints that once limited reptile behavior, allowing for more active lifestyles and more complex social behaviors. Many reptile species develop enhanced abilities to regulate their body temperature through behavioral and physiological adaptations rather than relying entirely on environmental heat sources. Freshwater ecosystems throughout the world become incredibly productive as the warm temperatures and abundant nutrients create ideal conditions for aquatic life. Fish populations often explode in abundance, with many species achieving sizes and population densities that were never sustainable during Earth's cooler periods. The complex food webs that develop in these freshwater systems often support remarkable diversity at every trophic level. The plant communities that exist along the margins of freshwater systems develop into some of the most spectacular ecosystems on the planet. These riparian forests and wetland margins often become corridors of incredible biological abundance that connect different habitat types and provide pathways for the movement of animals between ecosystems. Mountain ecosystems undergo particularly dramatic transformations as the warming climate eliminates the cold conditions that once characterized high elevations. Alpine plants that were once restricted to brief growing seasons find themselves able to grow continuously, often achieving levels of abundance and diversity that transform mountain landscapes into gardens of incredible beauty. The elimination of permanent snow and ice from most mountain ranges opens up vast new areas for colonization by plants and animals that were previously excluded by cold temperatures. These newly available mountain habitats often become centers of evolutionary innovation as species adapt to the unique combinations of elevation, slope, and exposure that characterize different mountain environments. Pollination networks throughout these transformed ecosystems become incredibly sophisticated as the abundance and diversity of flowering plants creates opportunities for specialized relationships between plants and their animal pollinators. Bees, butterflies, birds, and other pollinators often evolve remarkable adaptations that allow them to exploit specific flower types, while plants develop increasingly elaborate strategies for attracting and rewarding their pollinators. The seed dispersal networks that move plant genetic material between different locations also become more complex and effective as the abundance of fruit-eating animals creates numerous pathways for plants to colonize new habitats. The result is often rapid expansion of plant ranges and increased genetic mixing between plant populations, contributing to the evolutionary innovation that characterizes this period. Decomposer communities, including bacteria, fungi, and various invertebrates, become incredibly active and efficient as the warm, humid conditions accelerate the breakdown of organic matter. This enhanced decomposition activity ensures rapid nutrient cycling that supports the high levels of primary productivity characteristic of most ecosystems during this period. The soil communities that support terrestrial ecosystems reach new levels of complexity and activity as earthworms, insects, and microorganisms create intricate networks for processing organic matter and maintaining soil fertility. These soil ecosystems often become as diverse and complex as the above-ground communities they support. As this remarkable period of biological abundance continues, life demonstrates its incredible ability to not merely survive dramatic environmental change, but to use that change as an opportunity to achieve new levels of complexity, beauty, and ecological integration. The warming Earth becomes a testament to the resilience and creativity of life, showing how biological communities can adapt to virtually any conditions while maintaining the essential processes that sustain the biosphere. Chapter 7. The Polar Ice Dance. As we continue our peaceful drift through the vast expanse of geological time, we arrive at one of the most elegant and graceful transformations in Earth's history, the slow, beautiful retreat of the polar ice that has characterized our planet for millions of years. This is not a story of violent melting or catastrophic change, but rather a gentle dance between ice and warmth that unfolds over millions of years with the same patient rhythm that governs all the great transformations we have witnessed on our warming world. Picture yourself standing at what was once the edge of a great ice sheet, perhaps 5 billion years into the future from our starting point. The landscape before you tells a story of gradual change that has unfolded with such gentle persistence that each generation of life has had ample time to adapt and find new ways to flourish. Where once there stretched an endless expanse of white ice reaching to the horizon, you now see landscapes of breathtaking beauty that speak of the Earth's remarkable ability to transform itself while maintaining its essential character as a haven for life. The great ice sheets that once covered vast regions of both polar areas have been retreating with the patience of geological processes, leaving behind landscapes that seem almost designed to showcase the beauty that can emerge when ice slowly gives way to the warming influence of our gradually expanding Sunday. This retreat hasn't happened suddenly or chaotically, but rather with the same measured rhythm that characterizes the melting of a massive ice sculpture placed in a room that becomes just slightly warmer each day over the course of centuries. The Antarctic ice sheet, that massive accumulation of frozen water that once buried an entire continent under miles of ice, has been slowly revealing the hidden landscape beneath with all the drama of an artist gradually unveiling a masterpiece. As the ice has retreated over the millions of years, it has exposed mountain ranges of stunning beauty, valleys carved by ancient glacial action, and geological formations that tell the story of Earth's deep history in stone and mineral deposits that sparkle in the warm, golden light of the expanded sun. The process of ice retreat creates landscapes of extraordinary beauty and geological interest. As the massive weight of ice is gradually removed from the land beneath, the bedrock begins to rise slowly in a process called isostatic rebound. This geological resurrection happens with the same patient persistence that characterizes all the changes during this period, with the land rising by inches each century as it adjusts to its freedom from the immense pressure that has held it down for millions of years. The newly exposed Antarctic landscape reveals geological wonders that rival any found on Earth. Ancient volcanic formations, carved and sculpted by millions of years of glacial action, create natural architecture of breathtaking beauty. Mountain peaks that were once buried under ice now stand revealed in the warm Antarctic air, their summits catching the golden light of sunrise and sunset in displays that seem almost too beautiful to be real. The valleys that were carved by glacial action over millions of years become corridors for new life as rivers and streams begin to flow through terrain that hasn't seen liquid water for geological ages. These waterways create oases of life in the newly revealed landscape, with vegetation gradually establishing itself along their banks and spreading outward to colonize the surrounding areas. Lakes begin to form in depressions that were carved by ancient glacial action, fed by the gradually melting remnants of ice and by precipitation that falls as rain rather than snow in the warming Antarctic climate. These new lakes often become centers for the development of unique ecosystems that combine elements from both polar and temperate environments, creating biological communities unlike any that have existed before. The soil development that follows ice retreat represents one of the most remarkable examples of terrestrial ecosystem establishment in Earth's history. The process begins with the weathering of exposed bedrock and the accumulation of organic matter from the first hardy plants that manage to establish themselves in the harsh but gradually improving conditions. Over thousands of years, these initial colonizers create the foundation for increasingly complex soil systems that can support more diverse plant communities. The plant colonization of newly ice-free areas happens with the same patient progression that characterizes ecological succession everywhere, but accelerated by the favorable climate conditions that now exist even in polar regions. Pioneer species, often mosses and lichens that can survive in minimal soil, establish the first foothold for plant life. They are gradually joined by grasses and small flowering plants that take advantage of the slowly improving soil conditions and the absence of competition from established plant communities. As soil depth and fertility increase over thousands of years, shrubs and eventually trees begin to establish themselves in the most favorable locations. The forests that eventually develop in these formerly ice-covered regions often have unique characteristics that reflect their polar origins and the particular sequence of species colonization that occurred during the gradual warming process. The Arctic Ocean region undergoes an equally dramatic but beautifully gradual transformation as the sea ice that once covered it year-round slowly diminishes and eventually disappears entirely. The process happens so gradually that Arctic marine ecosystems have time to adapt and evolve, often developing new characteristics that take advantage of the year-round open water conditions. The elimination of Arctic sea ice creates opportunities for entirely new types of marine ecosystems to develop in polar waters. The constant sunlight that characterizes Arctic summers, combined with the nutrient-rich waters and the absence of ice cover, creates conditions for explosive marine productivity during the summer months. Phytoplankton blooms of unprecedented magnitude often develop, creating the foundation for marine food webs that support remarkable concentrations of marine life. The land areas that border the Arctic Ocean experience their own remarkable transformations as the warming climate and the moderating influence of the ice-free ocean create conditions favorable for plant and animal life. Regions that were once tundra characterized by permanently frozen soil gradually develop into temperate grasslands and eventually into boreal forests that extend farther north than any forests in Earth's previous history. The permafrost that once characterized vast regions of the Arctic gradually thaws as the warming climate penetrates deeper into the soil each year. This thawing process releases nutrients that have been locked in frozen soil for thousands of years, often creating conditions of remarkable fertility that support explosive plant growth once the soil temperature becomes suitable for root development. The thawing of permafrost also releases carbon that has been stored in frozen organic matter for millennia. But this release happens gradually enough that Earth's enhanced vegetation and marine productivity can absorb the additional atmospheric carbon dioxide without creating runaway greenhouse effects. The process becomes part of the complex dance of carbon cycling that helps maintain Earth habitability even during this period of dramatic change. Mountain glaciers around the world participate in their own version of the polar ice dance, retreating gradually up their valleys as the warming climate makes it increasingly difficult for ice to accumulate and persist at lower elevations. The retreat of these glaciers reveals landscapes of stunning alpine beauty, with valleys carved by millions of years of glacial action now hosting rivers, lakes, and eventually vegetation communities adapted to high-altitude conditions. The lakes that form in valleys formerly occupied by glaciers often become some of the most beautiful water bodies on Earth. Fed by streams from the remaining glacial ice and by precipitation that increasingly falls as rain rather than snow, these alpine lakes create oases of tranquility in mountain landscapes that are gradually being transformed by the warming climate. The vegetation that colonizes former glacial areas and mountain regions often develops unique characteristics adapted to the particular combinations of elevation, slope orientation, and climate conditions found in each location. Alpine meadows expand dramatically as the growing season lengthens and the snow-free period extends throughout most of the year. The wildlife that inhabits these transforming polar and alpine regions demonstrates remarkable adaptability in adjusting to the gradually changing conditions. Many species that were once adapted to cold, ice-dominated environments successfully transition to life in the warmer, ice-free conditions, while new species gradually colonize the regions as they become more hospitable to life. Polar bears and other ice-dependent species face the ultimate test of evolutionary adaptability as their icy habitat gradually disappears. Some populations successfully adapt to life in ice-free environments, developing new hunting strategies and dietary preferences that allow them to thrive in the transformed Arctic ecosystem. Others gradually shift their ranges to follow the retreating ice, while still others may hybridize with related species to create new evolutionary lineages adapted to the changing conditions. Seabirds that once depended on sea ice for resting and feeding areas adapt to the ice-free polar oceans by developing new behaviors and ecological relationships. Many species find that the absence of ice actually improves their access to marine food resources, leading to population expansions and range extensions that were impossible during the ice-covered periods. Marine mammals that once lived in ice-dominated polar seas often experience population booms as the ice-free conditions improve their access to food and breathing areas while eliminating many of the hazards associated with navigating through shifting ice flows. Whales, seals, and other marine mammals develop new migration patterns and feeding strategies that take advantage of the transformed polar marine environment. Chapter 8: Mountains and Continents. As our gentle journey through deep time carries us further into Earth's transformed future, we turn our attention to one of the most spectacular aspects of our planet's adaptation to the warming climate. The remarkable changes that occur in mountain ranges and continental landscapes as the increased solar energy reshapes the very foundations of terrestrial geography. These changes unfold with the same patient persistence that characterizes all the transformations we have witnessed, creating landscapes of beauty and biological richness that surpass anything that existed during Earth's cooler periods. Imagine standing on a mountain peak during this distant epoch, perhaps 6 billion years beyond the beginning of the sun's expansion. The vista that spreads before you tells a story of landscapes that have been gently but fundamentally transformed by the warming climate, yet which retain all the majesty and grandeur that has always characterized Earth's great mountain ranges. The peaks around you rise into an atmosphere that is warmer and more humid than any that has existed in Earth's previous history, while the valleys below support ecosystems of unprecedented lushness and diversity. The mountain ranges that once stood as stark, cold ramparts defining the edges of climate zones have become gentler, more hospitable environments that support life from their bases to their summits. The tree lines that once marked the upper limits of forest growth have advanced steadily upward over the millions of years, until continuous forest cover extends to elevations that were once characterized by permanent snow and ice. These high-altitude forests often develop unique characteristics adapted to the reduced atmospheric pressure and intense solar radiation found at elevation, creating woodland ecosystems unlike any that existed during Earth's cooler periods. The disappearance of permanent snow and ice from all but the highest peaks creates opportunities for plant and animal colonization of vast areas that were previously too cold and harsh to support complex life. Alpine meadows expand dramatically, spreading across slopes and valleys that were once buried under glacial ice for most or all of the year. These high-altitude grasslands often achieve levels of productivity and floral diversity that create natural gardens of breathtaking beauty stretching across entire mountain faces. The geological processes that shape mountain landscapes continue to operate during this period, but they do so under significantly different climatic conditions that alter the patterns of erosion, weathering, and sediment transport. The increased precipitation that characterizes most mountain regions during the warming period accelerates chemical weathering processes while also increasing the volume of water flowing through mountain drainage systems. Rivers that flow through mountain valleys become larger and more powerful as they carry increased volumes of water from the enhanced precipitation and from the melting of remaining glacial ice. These enhanced river systems carve deeper valleys and transport greater quantities of sediment, often creating new patterns of landscape evolution that differ significantly from those that characterize mountain regions during Earth's cooler periods. The enhanced weathering and erosion processes also accelerate the formation of soil in mountain regions, creating deeper and more fertile growing media that can support more complex plant communities. Mountain soils that were once thin and poorly developed gradually become rich and deep, supporting forest ecosystems that were impossible under the harsh conditions that previously characterized high-elevation environments. The continental landscapes that stretch between mountain ranges undergo their own remarkable transformations as the warming climate alters the fundamental patterns of temperature and precipitation that have shaped terrestrial environments for millions of years. Plains and plateaus that were once characterized by grasslands adapted to limited water availability gradually develop into parkland landscapes where trees and grasslands create complex mosaics of habitat that support extraordinary biological diversity. The great river systems that drain continental landscapes adapt to the changed precipitation patterns by developing new characteristics that reflect the enhanced water cycle of the warming planet. Many rivers become larger and more stable as they benefit from increased precipitation in their watersheds, while others develop new meandering patterns as they adjust to carrying greater volumes of water and sediment. The floodplains associated with these enhanced river systems often become some of the most biologically productive areas on the continents, supporting complex ecosystems that benefit from the regular deposition of nutrient-rich sediments and the abundant water supplies. These riparian ecosystems frequently develop into corridors of exceptional biological richness that connect different habitat types and provide pathways for the movement of species across continental landscapes. The continental interiors that were once characterized by arid or semi-arid conditions often experience dramatic increases in precipitation as the enhanced atmospheric moisture content and altered circulation patterns bring regular rainfall to regions that previously received limited precipitation. These newly humid continental interiors frequently develop into temperate forest ecosystems that support levels of biological productivity that were never possible under the drier conditions of Earth's cooler periods. The transformation of continental climates also affects the distribution of different vegetation types across large geographic areas. Grassland ecosystems, which were once limited to specific climate zones, often expand into regions that become suitable as temperature and precipitation conditions change. At the same time, forest ecosystems advance into areas that were previously too dry or too cold to support tree growth. These vegetation changes happen gradually enough that animal communities have ample time to adapt their ranges and behaviors to the shifting habitat distributions. Large herbivores often follow the expanding grasslands into new regions, while forest-dwelling species gradually colonize newly forested areas. The result is frequently a complex reorganization of continental ecosystems that creates new patterns of species distribution and ecological interaction. Soil systems across continental landscapes undergo significant changes as the warming climate accelerates biological and chemical processes that affect soil formation and nutrient cycling. Soils in many regions become deeper and more fertile as increased plant productivity provides more organic matter, while enhanced bacterial and fungal activity speeds the decomposition processes that release nutrients for plant uptake. The carbon storage capacity of continental soils often increases dramatically during this period, as the enhanced plant productivity provides larger quantities of organic matter for incorporation into soil systems. This increased soil carbon storage plays an important role in regulating atmospheric carbon dioxide levels and helping to maintain the climatic stability that allows for continued biological productivity. Wetland systems expand dramatically across continental landscapes as the increased precipitation and enhanced water cycle create conditions favorable for the development of marshes, swamps, and other water-dominated ecosystems. These expanded wetlands often become centers of exceptional biological productivity while also playing crucial roles in water purification and flood control. The new wetland systems that develop during this period frequently support remarkable concentrations of wildlife, particularly waterfowl and other birds that depend on aquatic habitats for feeding and reproduction. Many wetlands become stopover points for migrating species, while also serving as permanent habitat for resident populations that take advantage of the stable, productive conditions. Desert regions, which become increasingly rare as the warming climate brings more precipitation to previously arid areas, undergo their own unique transformations. Some desert areas gradually transition to grassland or woodland as increased precipitation overcomes the water deficits that previously prevented plant establishment. Others develop into novel ecosystem types that combine desert adaptations with the increased water availability characteristic of the warming period. The plant and animal species that inhabit these transforming desert regions often develop remarkable adaptations that allow them to take advantage of both the water conservation strategies that evolved during arid periods and the enhanced resource availability that comes with increased precipitation. These desert-adapted species frequently become highly successful in the transformed environments, sometimes expanding their ranges dramatically as suitable habitat increases. Coastal plains and lowland areas experience particularly dramatic changes as rising sea levels gradually inundate low-lying regions, while simultaneously creating new coastal habitats that support highly productive marine and terrestrial ecosystems. The slow pace of sea level rise allows for orderly migration of coastal ecosystems inland while new coastal environments develop along the advancing shoreline. The interaction between continental and marine systems becomes more complex and extensive as rising sea levels create larger areas where terrestrial and marine environments meet. These transition zones often develop into some of the most biologically diverse and productive ecosystems on the planet, supporting species assemblages that combine elements from both terrestrial and marine environments. Volcanic regions that exist within continental landscapes often experience changes in their eruption patterns and environmental impacts, as the warming climate alters the local conditions that affect volcanic processes. In many cases, the enhanced precipitation and vegetation cover help to moderate the local environmental effects of volcanic activity while also accelerating the formation of fertile soils from volcanic ash and rock. The enhanced biological productivity that characterizes most continental landscapes during this period often leads to accelerated succession processes in areas affected by natural disturbances such as landslides, fires, or volcanic eruptions. The abundant moisture and favorable temperatures allow for rapid recolonization and ecosystem recovery that often result in more diverse and stable biological communities than existed before the disturbance. Underground water systems throughout continental areas often become more abundant and more stable as the increased precipitation recharges aquifer systems that may have been depleted during Earth's drier periods. These enhanced groundwater resources provide reliable water supplies for both natural ecosystems and any human communities that may still exist, contributing to the overall stability and productivity of continental landscapes. The mineral and geological resources that are exposed by enhanced weathering and erosion processes often become more accessible during this period, while the stable climatic conditions make resource extraction and utilization more predictable and sustainable. However, the abundance of biological resources and the generally favorable environmental conditions often reduce the pressure for intensive resource exploitation. As this remarkable period of continental transformation continues, Earth's great landmasses become increasingly hospitable to life, while maintaining the geological diversity and natural beauty that has always characterized our planet's terrestrial landscapes. The warming climate reveals new possibilities for the development of continental ecosystems, while demonstrating the remarkable resilience and adaptability that allows both geological and biological systems to thrive under dramatically changed conditions. Chapter 9. The Last Seasons. As we drift deeper into our peaceful journey through the vast expanse of cosmic time, we arrive at one of the most poignant and beautiful chapters in Earth's story: the gradual transformation of our planet's seasonal rhythms as the sun continues its slow expansion toward its red giant face. This is not a tale of abrupt change or dramatic disruption, but rather the gentle evolution of Earth's most familiar and beloved patterns into something entirely new yet equally beautiful. Picture yourself experiencing what may be among the last traditional seasons that Earth will know, perhaps 7 billion years into the future from our starting point. The spring morning that surrounds you carries hints of the profound changes that are slowly reshaping our planet's relationship with its star. The air feels warmer than any spring in Earth's long history, yet it retains that special quality of renewal and awakening that has characterized the season since life first began to respond to the annual cycle of changing daylight and temperature. The sun that rises on this distant spring morning appears noticeably larger than the star that once greeted ancient springs, its disk expanded enough that careful observation reveals its growth even without instruments. The light that bathes the awakening landscape has taken on a distinctly golden-orange hue that gives every surface a warm, honey-colored glow. This is sunlight that seems to have been filtered through amber, creating an eternal golden hour quality that transforms even the most ordinary scenes into moments of breathtaking beauty. As this final phase of seasonal Earth unfolds, the traditional patterns that have governed life for billions of years begin to shift in subtle but profound ways. Winter, that season of dormancy and conservation that once brought snow and ice to vast regions of the planet, gradually becomes a gentler time of rest rather than harsh survival. The cold that once defined winter slowly moderates as the sun's increasing energy output makes it more difficult for truly frigid conditions to develop even in the highest latitudes. Snow, that crystalline precipitation that once blanketed much of Earth during winter months, becomes increasingly rare and precious. When it does fall, it often melts quickly in the warmer air temperatures, creating brief moments of winter beauty that seem almost magical in their rarity. Children who grow up during this period might experience snow as a rare and wonderful phenomenon rather than a regular seasonal occurrence, making each snowfall an event of special celebration and wonder. The winter landscapes that do develop during this period often have a unique character that combines elements of traditional winter with the warmer conditions created by the brightening sun. Trees may lose their leaves in response to shorter daylight periods, but they rarely experience the deep dormancy that once characterized winter tree physiology. Instead, they enter a gentler period of reduced activity that allows for some continued growth even during the coolest months. Spring arrives earlier each year. As the warming climate advances, the timing of temperature increases and the biological responses they trigger. The season that once brought dramatic awakening after months of winter dormancy gradually becomes a more subtle transition from a mild winter rest period to the active growing season. Yet spring retains its essential character as a time of renewal and new beginnings, even as the changes it brings become less dramatic. The spring flowers that have always marked the season's arrival adapt to the changed conditions by extending their blooming periods and often flowering in multiple waves throughout the year. Cherry blossoms, tulips, and daffodils may bloom for weeks or months rather than the brief periods that characterize their flowering in Earth's cooler climate. The result is often landscapes that seem to be in a constant state of spring beauty, with different species coming into flower in overlapping sequences that create nearly year-round floral displays. Bird migration patterns, those ancient rhythms that have connected distant regions for millions of years, begin to change as the temperature differences between traditional summer and winter ranges become less pronounced. Many bird species discover that suitable conditions now exist year-round in regions where they once had to migrate seasonally, leading to the establishment of permanent resident populations in areas that were once only temporary stopping points. The birds that do continue to migrate often travel shorter distances or follow new routes that reflect the changed distribution of suitable habitat and food resources. Some species develop new migration patterns that follow the subtle temperature and resource gradients that still exist, while others abandon migration entirely in favor of year-round residence in the increasingly hospitable conditions. Summer, traditionally the season of maximum growth and activity, gradually extends its influence across more of the year as the warming climate creates summer-like conditions for longer periods. The intense heat that once characterized summer in many regions becomes moderated by the increased humidity and cloud cover that result from enhanced evaporation, often creating summer conditions that are warm but not oppressively hot. The extended growing seasons that result from longer, milder summers allow plants to achieve levels of growth and productivity that were impossible when they had to complete their annual cycles in shorter time periods. Trees grow larger and produce more fruit, while agricultural crops can often be grown continuously rather than in discrete seasonal cycles. Gardens become year-round sources of flowers and food, creating landscapes of perpetual abundance. Summer thunderstorms, those dramatic displays of atmospheric energy that once marked hot afternoons in many regions, often become gentler and more predictable as the enhanced moisture content of the atmosphere and the reduced temperature gradients create conditions for more stable weather patterns. When storms do occur, they frequently bring beneficial rain rather than destructive winds and hail. Autumn, perhaps the most beloved of seasons for its beauty and its poignant reminder of time's passage, undergoes its own gentle transformation as the warming climate alters the conditions that create fall's characteristic displays. The temperature differences between summer and winter that once drove dramatic autumn color changes become less extreme, often extending the period of color change and making it more gradual and subtle. The deciduous trees that create autumn's spectacular displays often develop new patterns of seasonal change that reflect the modified climate conditions. Rather than rapid leaf color change followed by quick leaf drop, many trees develop extended periods of color that can last for months rather than weeks. Some species may retain their colorful foliage throughout what was once winter, creating landscapes that maintain autumn beauty for much longer periods. The harvest seasons that have marked autumn throughout human history continue, but often extend across longer periods as crops can be planted and harvested multiple times per year. The abundance that results from extended growing seasons and favorable weather conditions often creates harvest celebrations that last for months rather than concentrating into brief periods of intensive activity. The animal behaviors that have traditionally marked seasonal transitions also evolve to match the changing climate patterns. Bears and other animals that once entered deep winter hibernation may experience only brief periods of reduced activity, while many continue active feeding and social behaviors throughout what were once the dormant months. The fat accumulation and metabolic changes that once prepared animals for harsh winter survival become less necessary as winter conditions moderate. Insects and other small animals that once had strictly seasonal life cycles often develop extended activity periods or multiple generations per year as the favorable conditions last longer. Butterfly populations may flourish for most of the year rather than being limited to brief summer peaks, while bee colonies can often remain active and productive throughout most of the annual cycle. The plant communities that have evolved to take advantage of seasonal variations in light, temperature, and moisture gradually adapt to the more stable conditions by developing new growth patterns and reproductive strategies. Many plants that once concentrated their reproduction into brief optimal periods find that they can flower and produce seeds throughout most of the year, often resulting in nearly continuous reproduction that maintains constant plant population renewal. As these final traditional seasons gradually give way to the more stable climate patterns that will characterize Earth's red giant future, the planet experiences a unique period when seasonal beauty takes on new forms while retaining echoes of the ancient patterns that have defined Earth's rhythms for billions of years. This is a time of transition that honors the past while embracing an entirely new relationship between Earth and its evolving star. Chapter 10. The Tender Embrace. As our gentle journey through cosmic time reaches its most profound moment, we witness the beginning of the sun's most dramatic transformation, its expansion into a true red giant star that will fundamentally alter every aspect of existence in our solar system. Yet even this ultimate change unfolds with the same patient grace that has characterized every step of our star's evolution, demonstrating that even the most dramatic cosmic events can occur with a gentleness that allows for adaptation and beauty rather than destruction and chaos. Imagine standing on Earth's surface during this extraordinary epoch, perhaps 8 billion years beyond the beginning of our story. The sun above you has grown dramatically larger than the star that once shone on our planet's early history, its disk now visibly expanded to perhaps twice its former size. The light that bathes the landscape around you has taken on a deep, warm orange-red hue that transforms every surface into something that seems touched by eternal sunset, creating a world where golden hour has become a permanent condition rather than a brief daily transition. The expansion that brings the sun to this magnificent size happens gradually over millions of years, allowing Earth's climate and biological systems time to adjust to each incremental change in solar energy output. The process resembles the slow blooming of a cosmic flower, with our star's outer layers gently expanding as the nuclear processes in its core drive the complex dance of stellar evolution that will ultimately reshape our entire solar system. The increased energy output from the expanded sun creates surface temperatures on Earth that are significantly warmer than any the planet has experienced. Yet life continues to find ways to thrive in these challenging but gradually changing conditions. The warming happens slowly enough that evolutionary processes can keep pace, allowing species to adapt their physiology and behavior to maintain comfort and functionality under the new thermal regime. Water, that essential component of all life as we know it, begins to behave differently under the intensified solar heating. The enhanced evaporation that results from the increased energy input creates an atmosphere so rich with water vapor that humidity levels remain high even as temperatures climb. This moisture-saturated air often creates spectacular cloud formations and atmospheric optical effects that transform the sky into a constantly changing canvas of beauty. The water cycle intensifies dramatically as the enhanced solar energy drives more vigorous evaporation and precipitation patterns. Rain falls more frequently and often more intensely, but the precipitation usually comes in the form of warm, tropical-style downpours that provide relief from the heat while maintaining the high humidity levels that help moderate temperature extremes. These enhanced precipitation patterns often create rainbow displays of unprecedented frequency and intensity as sunlight interacts with water droplets in the moisture-rich atmosphere. Rivers and lakes respond to the intensified water cycle by becoming larger and warmer, often supporting aquatic ecosystems that thrive in the tropical-like conditions. Many water bodies develop characteristics similar to warm springs, maintaining temperatures that support year-round biological activity while providing refuges of relative coolness during the warmest periods. The plant communities that have adapted to Earth's gradually warming climate find new challenges and opportunities as the sun's expansion creates even more intense conditions. Many species develop enhanced heat tolerance and water conservation abilities, while others take advantage of the abundant atmospheric moisture to develop new strategies for dealing with high-temperature environments. Forest ecosystems often adapt by developing more complex canopy structures that create multiple layers of shade and air circulation. These multi-tiered forests frequently become more productive than their predecessors as they learn to efficiently use the intense solar energy while creating cooler microclimates in their understory areas. Walking through these adapted forests often feels like moving through natural air conditioning systems where the temperature drops noticeably beneath the canopy. Desert-adapted plants find themselves particularly well-suited to the new conditions, often expanding their ranges dramatically as their heat tolerance and water conservation abilities give them advantages in the warming world. Many desert species develop into larger, more robust forms as the increased atmospheric humidity provides them with more available moisture than they experienced in their original arid environments. Agricultural systems, if they still exist in recognizable forms after such vast periods of time, adapt to the intensified conditions by focusing on heat-tolerant crops and developing new techniques for managing the abundant solar energy. Greenhouse cultivation often becomes particularly effective as the intense solar energy can be captured and controlled while protecting crops from the most extreme temperature variations. Animal life demonstrates remarkable adaptability in adjusting to the warming conditions through both physiological and behavioral modifications. Many species develop enhanced heat tolerance while others adapt by becoming more active during cooler periods and resting during peak heat. The abundant water resources created by the intensified water cycle often provide animals with new opportunities for thermoregulation through swimming and wallowing. Large animals often develop new social behaviors that help them cope with the heat, such as sharing shaded areas and cooperating in the creation of cooler microclimates. Herd animals may travel in patterns that take advantage of cloud cover and precipitation, while forest-dwelling species often become more arboreal to take advantage of the cooler conditions in tree canopies. Marine ecosystems experience their own dramatic transformations as the warming climate creates ocean temperatures that support tropical conditions throughout most of the world's water bodies. Coral reefs often achieve unprecedented expansion and diversity as warm water conditions become available in regions that were once too cool for coral growth. Fish populations adapt to the warmer waters by developing enhanced heat tolerance and often by becoming more active and productive as the higher temperatures accelerate their metabolic processes. Many marine ecosystems become more productive overall as the warm conditions and abundant nutrients support explosive growth in marine food webs. The atmospheric composition continues to evolve as the intensified biological activity and enhanced rock weathering alter the balance of gases in Earth's atmosphere. Carbon dioxide levels often stabilize at new equilibrium points as enhanced plant growth and increased carbonate formation in warming oceans create new pathways for carbon cycling. Oxygen levels in the atmosphere may increase as the enhanced plant productivity pumps more oxygen into the air, creating atmospheric conditions that can support high metabolic activity in animals. The oxygen-rich, humid air often has a quality that feels energizing and life-supporting despite the challenging temperature conditions. Cloud formation becomes almost continuous in many regions as the moisture-rich atmosphere provides endless opportunities for water vapor condensation. These cloud systems often create complex patterns of light and shadow that provide natural cooling while also creating some of the most spectacular sky displays in Earth's history. The interaction between the deep red-orange sunlight and the abundant cloud formations often produces atmospheric scenes of breathtaking beauty. Weather patterns stabilize into new configurations that reflect the reduced temperature gradients between different regions and the enhanced moisture content of the atmosphere. Storms, when they occur, often take on characteristics of tropical weather systems, with warm rains and gentle winds rather than the violent temperature-driven weather of Earth's cooler periods. The day-night temperature differences that once characterized Earth's climate become much less pronounced as the intensified solar heating and enhanced atmospheric heat capacity create conditions where nighttime cooling is limited. This thermal stability often creates more predictable and manageable conditions for life, even as the overall temperature regime shifts toward higher values. Chapter 11. Beyond Our Story. As we reach the culmination of our peaceful journey through the vast expanses of cosmic time, we find ourselves contemplating not an ending, but rather a transformation so profound and beautiful that it transcends our usual understanding of beginnings and conclusions. The story we have witnessed unfold, the gradual expansion of our sun and the remarkable adaptation of Earth and its life to this cosmic change, represents just one chapter in the infinite book of universal evolution, a chapter that demonstrates the elegant patience with which the cosmos reshapes itself across unimaginable spans of time. Standing now at this distant vantage point, perhaps 10 billion years beyond our starting place, we can see the full arc of the transformation that began with such subtle changes in our star's energy output. The sun that now illuminates our world has grown into a magnificent red giant, its expanded atmosphere reaching out to embrace the inner planets with the same gentle persistence that has characterized every step of this cosmic dance. Earth itself, warmed by the tender embrace of its evolved star, has become something entirely new while retaining its essential character as a world where life finds ways to flourish. The temperatures that now characterize our planet's surface would have seemed impossibly extreme to the life forms of Earth's distant past. Yet through the miracle of gradual adaptation spread across geological time, complex ecosystems continue to thrive in conditions that demonstrate life's infinite creativity and resilience. The atmospheric envelope that surrounds our transformed world pulses with moisture and warmth, creating an environment where water vapor forms such a significant component of the air that the boundary between liquid and gaseous states becomes beautifully blurred. Clouds form and dissipate in endless cycles that create ever-changing patterns of light and shadow, while precipitation falls as warm, life-giving rain that nourishes ecosystems adapted to tropical abundance. The landscapes that stretch across Earth's continents bear little resemblance to those that existed during our planet's cooler periods, yet they maintain a beauty and biological richness that surpasses anything from Earth's past. Forests of unprecedented complexity create multi-layered canopies that efficiently capture and use the intense solar energy while creating cooler microclimates beneath their leaves. These woodland cathedrals often support levels of biodiversity that represent the culmination of billions of years of evolutionary innovation and adaptation. Water bodies across the planet have become warm, life-rich environments that support aquatic ecosystems of remarkable productivity and beauty. Rivers flow with the temperature of tropical seas, while lakes and wetlands create oases of biological abundance that demonstrate how life can adapt to virtually any conditions given sufficient time for evolutionary adjustment. The animal communities that inhabit this transformed Earth have evolved remarkable physiological and behavioral adaptations that allow them to thrive in the warm, humid conditions. Many species have developed enhanced heat tolerance and new social behaviors that help them cope with the intense solar energy, while others have found ways to take advantage of the abundant moisture and year-round growing conditions to achieve levels of population and diversity that were impossible during Earth's cooler epochs. Marine ecosystems flourish in the warm oceans that now characterize our planet's water bodies, with coral reefs and other tropical marine communities extending their ranges to encompass virtually all of Earth's oceanic areas. These underwater gardens pulse with life and color, creating some of the most spectacular biological displays in Earth's long history, while demonstrating the ocean's remarkable ability to support life under dramatically altered conditions. Yet even as we marvel at the adaptability and resilience that has allowed Earth's biosphere to thrive during this transformation, we must acknowledge that this period of red giant warmth represents a temporary phase in our star's evolution. The nuclear processes that drive stellar evolution will eventually exhaust even the helium fuel that currently powers the sun's expanded state, leading to further changes that will once again reshape the conditions for life in our solar system. But the story we have witnessed provides profound comfort and insight into the nature of cosmic change and the responses it can evoke from living systems. The transformation of our sun from a stable main sequence star into a red giant, a change that might have seemed catastrophic when viewed from the perspective of shorter timescales, has instead provided opportunities for life to achieve new levels of complexity and beauty through the patient process of evolutionary adaptation. The lesson that emerges from this cosmic story is not that change should be feared or resisted, but rather that the universe operates according to principles that favor gradual adjustment over sudden disruption. The timescales on which stellar evolution operates provide ample opportunity for life to respond and adapt, demonstrating that even the most fundamental changes in environmental conditions can become opportunities for growth and development rather than threats to survival. The patience with which these cosmic transformations unfold also provides perspective on the temporary nature of all conditions, whether favorable or challenging. The Earth that once supported dinosaurs, the Earth that currently supports human civilization, and the Earth that thrives under the warming embrace of a red giant sun are all temporary configurations in an ongoing process of change that extends across billions of years and ultimately across the entire history of the universe. This perspective can provide comfort and wisdom for contemplating change and challenge on any scale. Just as Earth's biosphere has successfully navigated the dramatic transition from a cool, stable world to a warm, red, giant illuminated planet, life on any scale demonstrates remarkable capacity for adaptation and growth when given sufficient time and patience for adjustment. The beauty that we have witnessed throughout this transformation, the spectacular sunsets created by the sun's reddening light, the lush ecosystems that thrive in the warming climate, the atmospheric displays that result from the enhanced water cycle, reminds us that change often brings new forms of beauty and wonder that were impossible under previous conditions. The universe seems to favor increasing complexity and beauty over time, creating new possibilities for aesthetic and spiritual enrichment even during periods of fundamental transformation. As we complete our journey through this cosmic story, we find ourselves filled not with sadness for what has been lost, but with wonder at what has been gained and appreciation for the remarkable processes that allow such transformations to unfold with grace and beauty. The gradual expansion of our sun and the patient adaptation of Earth's life to the changing conditions provide a template for understanding how all change, cosmic, planetary, or personal, can be navigated with wisdom, patience, and faith in the positive potential that exists within every transformation. The story of Earth under a red giant sun reminds us that the universe is not a hostile place where change brings only destruction and loss, but rather a cosmic garden where patient evolution creates ever new possibilities for life, beauty, and wonder. As you drift off to sleep, let this cosmic perspective bring you peace and comfort, knowing that you are part of a universe where change is the creative force that brings forth all beauty, and where patience and adaptation can transform even the most dramatic challenges into opportunities for growth and renewal.